Andrew sat quietly in the living room, the soft glow of the computer screen illuminating his face. It was late, and the world outside had already surrendered to the quiet stillness of the night. As he scrolled through his emails, his fingers moved almost automatically, a mindless task that allowed him to unwind. But then, something unexpected caught his eye. There was a message. At first glance, it seemed like any other, an ordinary name, an ordinary subject. But something in Andrew's gut twisted. The sender wasn't familiar, and the preview of the message stirred unease in his chest. He hesitated for a moment before opening it. The contents unfolded like a nightmare. Andrew's breath hitched as he read, his heart sinking deeper with every word. His wife, Anna, had been unfaithful. The message was from the man she'd been seeing, bold, careless, as if Andrew's world wasn't at risk of falling apart with every line. The man's words were detailed, full of moments Andrew had no knowledge of, places he'd never been, emotions he had never seen in Anna's eyes. A sharp pain clenched Andrew's chest, and his hands trembled slightly. He stood up, his legs unsteady, and paced the room as if movement could shake off the horrible truth. But it clung to him, heavy and suffocating. The trust he had built with Anna over the years, the love they had shared, shattered in an instant. Memories began to flood his mind. Birthdays, holidays, quiet moments shared in their home. They now felt tainted, like pieces of a picture he no longer recognized. His emotions surged: shock, disbelief, anger, and a deep, crushing sadness that left him feeling hollow. For a brief moment, the anger took hold. The betrayal burned in his veins, and he imagined storming into their bedroom, confronting Anna, demanding answers. How could she do this to him? To them? His thoughts raced, painting vivid images of revenge, of exposing her deceit, of making her feel the same pain she had inflicted on him. But as quickly as the anger came, it dissipated. Andrew sat back down, his head in his hands, feeling the weight of the situation press down on him. Revenge wasn't the answer. It wouldn't undo the betrayal, and it wouldn't heal the gaping wound in his heart. All that remained was the crushing sense of loss, the realization that the life he had known was gone. The room around him felt too quiet, too empty. He glanced towards the bedroom door, where Anna lay sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the storm that had just erupted in his heart. How could she sleep so easily, knowing what she had done? The thought gnawed at him, but even that anger felt dulled, muted by the overwhelming sorrow. Andrew knew he couldn't confront her, not yet. He wasn't ready. He needed time to process, to figure out what this meant for him, for them. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. He closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the window. The city was quiet, the streets below bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. He stared out into the darkness, feeling as if he were standing on the edge of a precipice, his life teetering on the brink of something unknown. His heart ached, and yet, in the silence of that moment, he knew that his next steps would define everything. Whatever came next, Andrew wasn't sure. But he knew he couldn't stay in this place of pain forever. There had to be a way forward, somehow. In the days that followed, Andrew could barely keep up the act that everything was fine. Anna's betrayal felt like a constant weight on his chest, impossible to ignore. Every time he looked at her, all he could see was the lie she had been living. So, he started avoiding being home, finding excuses to stay late at work or go out whenever possible. One afternoon, as Andrew walked out of a coffee shop, lost in his own thoughts, he heard a familiar voice call his name. He turned around and saw Kristen, Anna's younger sister, walking toward him with a smile that quickly faded when she saw how tired he looked. "Andrew? You look exhausted. Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. Andrew tried to play it off, but he wasn't fooling anyone. Not Kristen, at least. They had never been especially close, but she had always been kind, and he had always found her easy to talk to during family gatherings. "I'm fine, just work," he lied, though even he could hear how unconvincing that sounded. Kristen studied him for a moment, her brow furrowing. "It doesn't seem like just work. Do you want to talk about what's really going on?" Her offer caught him off guard. He wasn't expecting much from this encounter, maybe just a quick greeting and that would be it, but the genuine concern in her eyes stirred something in him. Without thinking much, he nodded. "Do you have time to sit?" he asked, motioning to a bench nearby. Kristen nodded and followed him to the bench. They sat in silence for a few moments before Andrew finally spoke. Things haven't been good lately. Between me and Anna." He couldn't bring himself to say more. The wound was still too fresh, too painful. Just admitting that much felt like he was reopening the hurt that he had been trying to keep buried. Kristen's expression softened. "I'm really sorry, Andrew. I had no idea. You two always seemed so good together." Andrew let out a bitter laugh, surprising even himself. "Yeah, I thought so too." Kristen didn't push for more details. She didn't ask any probing questions, and that was a relief. She just sat there next to him, offering her quiet presence, which somehow made him feel a little better. It wasn't a deep conversation, but it was enough to ease the weight he'd been carrying. "Do you want to grab a drink sometime?" "Just to talk, no pressure," Kristen suggested after a few minutes. "I know it won't fix anything, but sometimes it helps to get out of your head for a bit." Andrew hesitated. Was this a good idea? Spending more time with Kristen could complicate things even more. But at the same time, how could things get worse? His marriage was already falling apart, and right now, he just needed something to take his mind off the pain. "Yeah, that might be nice," he said, his voice low. "Thanks, Kristen." She gave him a small, genuine smile, and for the first time in days, Andrew felt a little warmth through the chaos. Over the next few weeks, Andrew and Kristen started spending more time together. It started innocently enough. A quick coffee after work, a casual drink in the evenings. At first, it was just an escape for Andrew, a way to avoid the tension at home and the suffocating thoughts about Anna's betrayal. But soon, he found himself looking forward to seeing Kristen. Their conversations flowed easily. Kristen had a way of making Andrew feel at ease, something he hadn't felt in a long time. She listened without judgment, and when she spoke, her words were thoughtful and comforting. There were no awkward silences between them, no forced topics. They talked about everything: work, life, and even childhood memories. Kristen opened up about her own struggles, things Andrew never knew. She shared stories about her past relationships, her fears, and her dreams. One evening, after grabbing dinner at a small restaurant, Kristen asked Andrew directly about Anna. "You never really told me what happened," she said gently, her eyes searching his face. "Between you and Anna, I mean?" Andrew hesitated. He wasn't sure if he was ready to go into details. But at this point, he felt like he owed her an explanation. She had been there for him in a way he hadn't expected, and he trusted her. "She cheated on me," he said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of the admission. "I found out a few weeks ago. She's been seeing someone else. I don't know for how long, but long enough." Kristen's expression shifted from curiosity to sympathy. "Andrew, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how hard that must have been to find out." Andrew nodded, the familiar ache settling in his chest again. "Yeah." They sat in silence for a while, both absorbing the gravity of what had been said. Kristen didn't push for more details, but her presence felt comforting. Andrew appreciated that she didn't rush to offer advice or cliches. She just sat with him in the moment, letting him feel whatever he needed to feel. As the evening went on, something began to shift between them. It wasn't anything either of them said, but Andrew started to notice small things, like how Kristen's laughter warmed the air around them, or how her smile seemed to light up the space they shared. He realized he was beginning to feel something more than just friendship toward her. At first, Andrew tried to push the thought away. This was Anna's sister, after all. Getting close to her would only make things more complicated. But the more time they spent together, the harder it became to ignore the connection building between them. One evening, as they walked along a quiet street after another long conversation, Andrew noticed how Kristen's hand brushed against his. It was a small, almost accidental touch, but it sent a ripple of awareness through him. He glanced at her, wondering if she felt it too, but her face remained neutral, as if nothing had happened. Still, Andrew couldn't shake the feeling. There was something between them, something that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had, and he was only just now noticing it. Either way, it was undeniable. The more time they spent together, the more he found himself drawn to her, in ways that went beyond friendship. But with that growing connection came a new wave of confusion. What did this mean for him? For Kristen? For Anna? He hadn't figured any of it out yet, and the thought of crossing a line he couldn't uncross scared him. Despite the confusion, Andrew couldn't help but feel alive again, something he hadn't felt since he'd discovered Anna's betrayal. And, for now, that was enough. The evening had been like so many others. Andrew and Kristen met up for drinks after a long week. They laughed and shared stories, talking about everything and nothing, finding comfort in each other's company. As the night went on, the air between them felt heavier, charged with something unspoken but undeniable. After they left the bar, they found themselves walking through a quiet park. The night was calm, and the only sounds were their footsteps on the gravel path and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. The conversation had quieted, leaving behind a comfortable silence. But there was something else in the air, something that neither of them wanted to address, yet both could feel. They reached a small bench under the soft glow of a streetlight and sat down. Andrew glanced at Kristen, who was looking up at the sky, lost in thought. Her face was illuminated by the gentle light, and for a moment he just watched her, feeling the weight of everything between them. Kristen finally turned to look at him, her eyes soft and full of something Andrew couldn't quite read. "You've been a lot quieter tonight," she said gently. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Andrew hesitated. How could he put into words what was happening? How could he tell her that every time they were together, he felt more connected to her in a way that confused and scared him? But instead of saying anything, he let the silence hang between them for a moment longer. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. I guess I've been thinking about a lot." Kristen nodded, her gaze steady and understanding. "It's okay, Andrew. You don't have to explain everything right now." There was a long pause, and before Andrew could stop himself, he reached out and took her hand. It was a small, instinctive gesture, but as soon as their fingers intertwined, something shifted. Kristen looked down at their hands, then back at Andrew, and in that moment, the space between them seemed to shrink. Andrew leaned in just slightly, testing the waters. He didn't know what he was expecting, maybe for Kristen to pull away, maybe for her to say something. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned in too, her breath hitching just for a second as their faces drew closer. And then, without thinking, Andrew closed the distance. The kiss was soft, hesitant at first, but then deeper, filled with all the emotions he hadn't been able to express in words. It wasn't just about the attraction, it was about everything they'd shared over the past few weeks. The understanding, the comfort, the connection. When they finally pulled back, neither of them spoke for a moment. Kristen looked at Andrew, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and something else, something that mirrored the confusion and desire he felt too. I didn't mean for that to happen," Andrew said softly, though he knew it wasn't entirely true. Kristen let out a small, shaky breath, still processing what had just happened. "Neither did I." They both sat there, caught in the moment, knowing that what had just happened would change everything between them. But for now, neither of them was ready to face what that really meant. Back at home, Andrew's mind was a whirlwind. The kiss with Kristen lingered in his thoughts, but with it came a wave of guilt. He hadn't planned on things going that far, but now that it had happened, he couldn't deny what he felt. The weight of his emotions made every interaction with Anna feel more strained. Anna, on the other hand, had noticed Andrew's distance, though she didn't know the full extent of what was going on. Over the past few days, she had made more of an effort to reconnect, sensing that something was wrong between them. She tried to recreate moments of intimacy, cooking his favorite meals or suggesting they watch a movie together, but Andrew remained emotionally unavailable, trapped in his own turmoil. One evening, as Andrew sat on the couch, lost in thought, Anna joined him, sitting unusually close. She placed her hand on his knee, a gentle but intentional touch. "Andrew," she began, her voice soft, "we haven't really been us lately. I miss how things used to be." Andrew didn't look at her right away. His mind was racing, torn between the guilt he felt for what had happened with Kristen and the anger he still carried toward Anna. He wanted to scream, to ask her how she could miss them when she had been the one to betray him first. But instead, he swallowed his words and glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Anna seemed to sense his hesitation. "I know I've been distant," she continued, her voice a little more fragile now. "And I know I've made mistakes. I haven't been the best wife, Andrew. But I want to fix that. I don't want us to fall apart." Andrew felt the familiar ache in his chest. This was the moment he had been dreading, her attempt to patch things up. She didn't know that the real damage had already been done, not just by her affair but now by the growing feelings he had for Kristen. There was a part of him that wanted to explode, to throw her betrayal in her face, but another part of him just felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of hurting. "Anna," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "you say you want to fix things, but I don't know if we can just go back to how things were. A lot has happened." "I know," she said quickly, a flicker of desperation in her eyes. "But I'm willing to try. We can go to counseling or take a trip together, anything. I love you, Andrew. I still want this marriage to work." Her words stung. Not because they weren't sincere, but because a part of him had wanted to hear them months ago, before everything had unraveled. Now it just felt too late. Andrew sighed and leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I can, Anna. I've tried to move past what happened, but it's not that simple." Anna's expression faltered, and for the first time, she looked truly vulnerable. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know I hurt you. I was selfish and stupid, and I hate myself for it. But I don't want to lose you." The words hung in the air between them. Andrew felt his chest tighten. He knew she was being honest, but the damage had already been done. He wasn't sure if it was possible to go back to the way things were before. He wasn't sure if he even wanted to. "I need time to figure things out," Andrew said finally, his voice distant. "I don't have all the answers right now." Anna nodded slowly, wiping away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. "Okay," she said quietly. "I understand." As she got up and walked away, Andrew felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, guilt, sadness. He had wanted this conversation to happen, to bring everything out in the open. But now that it had, he felt more conflicted than ever. And through it all, Kristen was still there in the back of his mind, complicating everything even more. Andrew felt the weight of everything growing heavier with each passing day. The kiss with Kristen, the conversation with Anna, and the constant conflict raging inside him left him feeling lost. He needed clarity, and the only person who seemed to offer him any kind of peace was Kristen. But even that had now become complicated. After several days of avoiding her, Andrew finally called Kristen. They met at a small cafe, the same one where they had shared so many casual, easy conversations before. But this time, the air between them was tense, charged with the unspoken feelings that had been building since their kiss. Kristen looked at him across the table, her face a mix of concern and something else he couldn't quite place. "You've been quiet," she said softly. "I wasn't sure if I should reach out, after everything." Andrew sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I've had a lot on my mind." Kristen nodded as if she already knew. "I figured. Andrew, if I made things worse for you, if that kiss—" "It's not that," Andrew interrupted, his voice soft but firm. "It's just, everything is a mess right now. Anna's trying to fix things, and I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. And then there's you." Kristen lowered her gaze, biting her lip as if unsure of what to say. Andrew felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't fair to her, and yet he couldn't help the way he felt. He reached out, gently touching her hand on the table. "I don't regret anything that happened," Andrew said, his voice almost a whisper. "But it's just complicated." Kristen looked up, her eyes meeting his, and then something shifted in her expression, something serious. "Andrew, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Andrew frowned, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "What is it?" Kristen hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I knew about Anna's affair. I've known for a while." The words hit Andrew like a punch to the gut. He stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "He knew," he repeated, disbelief and hurt lacing his voice. "I'm sorry," Kristen said quickly, her eyes pleading. "I didn't want to keep it from you, but I didn't know how to tell you. And I didn't want to hurt you." Andrew pulled his hand back, his mind racing. How could she have known all this time and never told him? He felt a surge of betrayal, but it was mixed with confusion. Why didn't you say anything? Why did you let me go on, not knowing? Kristen's eyes filled with tears. Because I didn't want to hurt you, Andrew. And because I've had feelings for you for a long time. I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe you'd figure it out on your own, and then... Andrew stared at her, the revelation sinking in slowly. He wasn't just dealing with Anna's betrayal now. Kristen had been hiding something too. His chest tightened as he tried to make sense of it all. Kristen reached for his hand again, but this time he pulled away. Andrew, please? He stood up, shaking his head. I need to think. I need some time. Without another word, Andrew walked out of the cafe, leaving Kristen behind. The confusion and hurt now felt even more unbearable, and he wasn't sure where to go from here. Andrew spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process everything. Kristen's revelation had shaken him to his core. It wasn't just Anna's betrayal anymore. It was the fact that Kristen, someone he had come to trust deeply, had kept such a huge secret from him. And now he didn't know what to believe or how to move forward. Eventually, he knew he couldn't avoid it any longer. He needed to confront Anna. He needed closure, if nothing else. One evening, he found himself pacing the living room, waiting for her to come home. His mind raced, the weight of the conversation heavy on his chest. When Anna finally walked through the door, she sensed the tension immediately. Andrew? Is everything okay? He turned to face her, his expression serious. We need to talk. Anna hesitated, her eyes scanning his face as if trying to gauge what was coming. She walked slowly to the couch, sitting down. What is it? She asked softly. Andrew took a deep breath, then sat across from her. He was done tiptoeing around the issue. I know about the affair, Anna. I've known for a while. Her face paled instantly. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. The silence hung heavy between them before she finally spoke. Andrew, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost and I made a terrible mistake. He looked at her, feeling the same pang of betrayal that had consumed him when he first found out. You didn't just hurt me, Anna. You broke everything we built together. I don't know if that's something we can ever come back from. Anna's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head, her voice trembling. I know. I hate myself for it. I've been trying to fix it, but I don't even know where to start. Andrew leaned back, the exhaustion from carrying all this weighing him down. It's too late, Anna. I'm not the same person I was before all of this. And, honestly, I don't think I can ever forgive what happened. Her tears spilled over, and she wiped them away quickly, trying to keep her composure. Is there someone else? She asked suddenly, as if the thought had just occurred to her. Andrew hesitated. He thought of Kristen, and how everything between them had complicated his feelings even more. But now wasn't the time to go into that. Not yet. It's not about that, he said quietly. It's about the fact that I can't trust you anymore. Anna nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I guess I always knew this would happen. The room fell into silence, and Andrew felt a strange sense of relief. The confrontation was over, and while nothing felt resolved, at least the truth was out in the open. Days passed, and Andrew found himself at a crossroads. The conversation with Anna had been necessary, but it hadn't brought the clarity he hoped for. He felt lost, torn between the weight of the past and the possibilities of the future. But one thing became increasingly clear: staying with Anna wasn't an option anymore. Their marriage had been broken beyond repair, and no amount of apologies or promises could change that. Andrew had spent a lot of time reflecting on Kristen as well. Her confession, that she had known about the affair but kept it to herself, had hurt him. But as he thought about everything they had shared over the past few months, he realized that her actions, though misguided, had come from a place of love. She hadn't meant to deceive him. She had been scared and unsure of how to navigate the situation, just as he had been. In the end, Andrew couldn't ignore what had grown between them. Despite the mess, despite the complications, his feelings for Kristen were real. They weren't born out of revenge or spite. They had developed naturally, through shared moments of understanding and genuine connection. And as much as it terrified him to admit it, he cared for her deeply. One evening, he called Kristen and asked to meet. They chose a quiet spot by the river, a place where they had often walked together in more innocent times. When she arrived, she looked nervous, unsure of what he was going to say. "I've been thinking a lot," Andrew began, his voice steady. "And I know things have been messy, but what I feel for you, it's real." Kristen looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Andrew, are you sure?" He nodded. "I'm sure. I love you, Kristen. And I want to see where this can go." For the first time in what felt like ages, Andrew felt a sense of peace. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, he was choosing to follow his heart, not his pain. And that, he realized, was the only way forward. Thanks for tuning in. If you loved this emotional story and want more captivating ones with unexpected twists, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you'll always know when a new story drops. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. We can't wait to hear what you think. See you in the next story.